So inherently, the mini doll and that system is set up to be, more cutesy, more animated, more expressive, more emotional, right?
Yeah, and I don't recall where I saw this discussion, but it fascinated me because the argument was that there's actually a difference in the way that boys and girls play with their toys.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We're your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm West.
And today we are debating minifigures versus mini dolls. But before we do that, West, as always, what are you building this week?
Well, Grinch, what am I building this week? It's a big fat goose egg. But, well, that's not true. I've been doing some digital building this week, and I'm very excited about it. There was a set that recently released. It's the Lego Spider-Man Doc Ock set in New York on top of the train, right? The subway. And it looks so good. And that subway car that they have featured in this set is done extraordinarily well. And so it inspired me because, Lego cities, we love to put train tracks in them and stuff, right? But like, it's hard to get these big trains into like these city layouts in a way that makes a lot of sense. And, there's not a lot of elevated trains in cities anymore, but the one city that has an iconic elevated train is Chicago. And there's some really interesting aspects to that elevated train in Chicago, which is they actually have really short rail cars. And it's because the train tracks in the city have really tight curves and radiuses. And so the entire subway system in Chicago is made up of these really short train cars that literally go on these elevated tracks above a city. And it's kind of the perfect stand-in for like the Lego rate, the 40 radius curve. And this train car that is provided in this set looks a lot like one of the L train cars. And so I did some research and I played around with which, series or, generation of train car it looked most similar to. And so long story short is I'm kind of mocking up a take on the Spider-Man train car for the L to then eventually include in a Lego city. And I want to kind of build it up so it can be motorized. And I think if you put like 3 of them together, I think that would just be like the perfect amount. And I just think that would look really great. So that is what I'm building this week.
That is not a bad idea. There you go. Well, West, I've been building a new future for me and my family.
I was just about to say
that. I don't know if the viewers on YouTube can see, but my office here is an absolute mess because I got the house packed. We're actually recording a little bit earlier than we normally would so that we can get this episode out. So thanks for the flexibility, Mr. West. But yeah, we are on the move, which only really means that I will be in a better environment to build some Lego here in the very near future. And I think that is exciting.
Yeah, there you go. That is exciting.
But do you know what else is exciting?
Ooh, what is?
Oh, man, dude. That was perfect. Okay. How about we talk about some exciting Lego news?
Let's do it.
Exciting Lego news. And it's gone.
Yeah, Grinch, there's really not much to talk about this week. Like you said, we're recording a little earlier in the week than we normally do. So there's actually 2 days between when our episode last week dropped and when we're recording this one. So we're recording this one on a Wednesday, and there just hasn't been a ton that's happened. Not only in kind of the larger Lego sphere, but just in general. The one thing I did want to call out is there's a lot of sales going on. This is probably too late for anybody, but there were some big Lego sales on Amazon for Prime Days, which I'm not really sure when they occur. It seems like whenever Amazon wants them to occur, but apparently there were some good
Mm-hmm.
deals. But there are also some really good deals right now on Lego.com, and there's a lot of stuff on sale on Lego.com, which is surprising because, as we've mentioned in the past, that's not historically a tactic that Lego does in mass. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
really kind of rare that Lego sets are on sale, at least in the United States. Certainly, you can get deals at Target and Walmart and stuff, but usually Lego themselves doesn't really have to put their own stuff on sale. So that's always an interesting indicator. I went into a Lego store a few years ago and actually for the first time saw like a not like a clearance like section, but it was definitely like a sale section in the store, and that was odd to see. So, but that's pretty much it for the week. Grinch, do you got anything on off the top of your dome?
Oh, this dome is doming. Um, no, I just, now's a good time to check that wanted list, make sure nothing's on sale on lego.com. And yeah, no news is good news, isn't that a saying?
It is a saying.
Unless
So
unless you have a Lego podcast where you have a news section about the news. Yeah.
I do want to say, we called out that we are expecting, probably in early December information on the future modular. But also this week that we are recording is the release of the new Tron movie. And this is 100% speculation on my part. So I want to call that out ahead of time. We had a Lego Tron idea set back in the day, the
Uh-huh.
mid 2010s ish.
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't be surprised if I guess I wouldn't say I wouldn't be surprised. It'd be interesting to see Lego return to that theme. And especially with Tron being a Disney property, right? You could totally see that being something that Lego would maybe want to expand in mass. Now, certainly that might be dependent on how well this movie does. But there's certainly lots of things in the Tron universe that I think would translate really well into Lego. And I'm kind of surprised we don't see, whether it's the light cycles from the idea set, some sort of vignette would be a really cool idea with the Lego Tron. They kind of feature a lot of like dark colors, but then like a lot of almost neon or very, bright and glowing colors, oranges, blues, reds, in
Uh-huh.
kind of really bright contrast. So I feel like that would translate really, really well into Lego.
Yeah, they haven't really done much other than that one set, really.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel like that could be a easy one for them. On not a completely other note, but the soundtrack to this new movie is done by Nine Inch Nails, and I think it does the Daft Punk soundtrack some justice. So it's holding its own. It's pretty good.
So as a fan of Tron, are you excited for the movie?
Yes, I think I'm gonna go see it on Friday. So
In theaters?
in theaters, yes, Grinch. In
Okay,
theaters, I know,
boomer.
wild for 2025, but
Dude.
on opening night, nonetheless.
Wow.
I know, I
I
know.
uh
I
man.
don't remember the last time I went to the movie theater. I think it
See,
was
I
to
just
see
had a
Spider
kid,
Man.
so like yeah.
Oh yeah,
We saw Wicked last. I hated it so much I never saw a movie again. I'm just kidding. It was fine. My wife loved it. It was like her second time seeing it. So uh but West, why don't we
Grinch.
transition from the news? There was you said we're expecting, and I was like, are we having a podcast, baby? Um Then you start talking about Tron. I'm like, maybe we should talk about movies. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Let's head over to today's topic.
Let's do it.
Today's topic. All right, Wes. So today we are talking about mini dolls versus minifigures. Why don't you give us a quick overview of the miniature doll?
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, we are kind of debating the pros and cons of mini dolls and minifigures. And I don't know if we're going to settle the debate tonight, but we wanted to kind of take a stab at it. It was requested, and we've certainly received some feedback on this topic. So let's get into
Uh-huh.
it. Mini dolls are the larger figure that was first introduced in 2012 with the Friends theme, and it's most, I would say, closely associated with the Friends theme, but not exclusively. And so you'll see them in Disney. There was a theme called Fusion Elves. I'm sure there's some others where the mini dolls have been incorporated. Right now, kind of the two main themes you're going to find them in are Lego Friends and Lego Disney. They were intended and are intended to be more realistic and proportioned and stylish to appeal to a female market. They are approximately 4.5 centimeters tall, which is just 5 millimeters taller than a standard minifigure, approximately. They're less blocky and, like I said, more stylized. You can kind of see a more shapely torso. You see, like, their heads are not sort of like a standard, almost like a square that like the Lego minifigures have. They kind of culminate in like a sharper chin than kind of your
Uh-huh.
standard minifigure. And then they have kind of more stylized and legs and torsos. Their hands and their heads are the same width as minifigures, though, and so hair pieces and handheld accessories are cross-compatible between the two themes, which is interesting because a lot of the hair pieces in the Lego Friends line are actually made out of a more malleable and bendable material, kind of more
Uh-huh.
rubberish than like the traditional plastic that you see in Lego. Although not all of the Friends hair pieces or mini doll hair pieces are that kind of squishier material, and so you will still find kind of like the hard plastic headpieces for some of like the male characters and Friends, for example. And then, yeah, a lot of the handheld accessories are cross compatible. So think things like spoons or forks are the same piece in the minifigures theme as they are in the Friends. And so it's funny because Friends has introduced a lot of new accessories into the minifigure line to include the spoons and the forks and stuff that we see today. They look extremely oversized for a Lego minifigure, but you put them in the hand of a Friend set or a mini doll. And
Uh-huh.
I think while they still probably are a little oversized for that mini doll, they are a lot more proportionally correct than they are for the minifigure. But one really key difference between the mini doll and minifigure is that the hands can't twist like the minifigure can. So the arms can still move, and the arms are not kind of flat against their side. They're actually sort of bowed on their sides. And then the legs are not independent. So they do bend at the waist, but they don't bend independent of each other. So think like a Lego Battle Droid, for example, how its legs are attached together.
Uh-huh.
And then, as I mentioned, and this was kind of a blurb from our source on this, which is we pulled this from Wikipedia, but kind of a quote from this whole thing was that the parts of a mini doll are specifically designed to be shapely and stylish to comply with girls' requests for a more realistic, relatable, and stylized figure, according to the Lego Group. So that was sort of the original intent of the mini doll. Since 2012, it's been featured in numerous sets. It kind of feels like it's here to stay, and even was included as a kind of main plot point in the Lego Movie 2, and sort of that
Uh-huh.
comparison between mini dolls and mini figures
Which also introduced, right, the first set where we got mini dolls and minifigures in them.
in the same set. Yeah.
In the same set, yeah. And I like you talked about the accessories. We got a lot of cool accessories. And while it wasn't novel to the mini dolls at any time, in fact, it came well before, you have really seen the Lego group embrace the mini peg system, when it comes to the mini dolls. You know, a lot of the hair pieces have that tiny
Yep.
hole on the top that's smaller than a bar, right? The infinity stone size hole that you saw on the side of like the Lego tap piece. There's a couple other random pieces, you know, most notably like the inkwell, the plumes, right, have this, but even the little bar with clip piece, the female and male version of them, the you know I'm talking about, the little kind of hand bar piece where you can stick a bar in
Yes.
it and you've got a clip on the end. That actually has
Mhm.
a peg hole on the side of it, and so does the actual bar with clip as well. So you saw the mini dolls really embrace this for stuff like, you know, hair accessories as just an additional way to accessorize a minifigure. And you've seen it, I guess, transitions a little bit over to minifigures since then. Obviously,
Mhm.
before with like knights and plumes and feathers and stuff like that, but never really for headphones or a bow or a tiara or a crown or something like that. That really kind of started with friends and was embraced by the friends group. And you know, West, also just to point out, as we talked earlier, you know, the mini doll isn't technically in the Lego system of
Right.
play scale. It's 4.5 centimeters, which means it's 4 bricks and a half tall. So there's no such thing as a half brick, at least not yet.
Yet.
You know, when a brick is 3 plates, right? So there, you can't divide that into plates in 2 parts. Whereas the minifigure, which we will talk about soon, is 4 bricks tall. So, you know, the next time you're, you know, when the mini doll first came out, that was a big to do. It was what is this? And I know we'll talk about this, but it was, what is this? This doesn't even fit in the Lego system. So, Wes, just so you know, the next time you try to make a building with mini dolls, you can't use bricks. Sorry.
There
Sorry
we
to break
go.
the news
Yeah.
to you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
It's a travesty to even be
yeah,
mixing the Lego system with mini dolls. And
that
the fact that
Taj
Lego even does
Mahal
it is
mini doll Taj Mahal that you were going to build is not
yeah,
is an illegal
not
build, my
legal.
friend.
It's an illegal
Yeah.
technique. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got the dear FBI on speed dial, so
Yeah, the Lego police. I'm gonna go to Lego jail.
the Fun Bureau
Uh,
of Investigation.
yeah.
Anything else about mini dolls?
No, I think we'll kind of get into it a little bit more as we go through the comparison, Grinch. But why don't you take away kind of what the minifigure is all about?
Obviously, this is the more hated of the two, the mini doll and the minifigures. That's a joke for anybody that's listening. You know, we got the classic minifigure here, also known as the minifig. As I mentioned, it's 4 bricks tall or 4 centimeters. It normally and technically is I believe the Lego sets count it as 3 parts, right? You've got the leg assembly, that they count that as one part on the box, the torso and the head. But if you were to break it down into subparts, which you can, nobody says you can't, although Lego doesn't encourage it. In fact, they don't want you to, because if you start ripping off the hands and the arms, you can, you know, get them damaged by moving them. And certainly whenever I've done custom stuff, when you snap back those arms into place, the joint does get a little bit loose.
Mhm.
If you do totally disassemble it, you can get it down to 9 to 10 parts, depending on how far you want to take that. Originally designed by the Lego model builder Jens um, Knudsen. Not even going to attempt the middle name. You can go right ahead. And what's interesting here is, you know, famously, Lego has lost the patent for the brick, but this is one instance where Lego has not lost their original patent back in 1979. So the first minifig 2 was that classic Lego police minifigure, right? They celebrated that in, what was that, series 18, with that chase minifigure with the Lego police officer. And so they still have a pattern. So when you get these kind of off brands like Funhole or somebody like that, um, they can't copy and replicate the minifigure. They do their own kind of system thing, right? But it's not the Lego minifigure. And yeah, composed of a head, torso, arms, hands, hips, legs, and like we talked about up front with the mini dolls, there are a number of hair pieces, helmets, hats, hoods, which when you put them on, typically make a minifigure not fit into the system as well. But nobody cared about that, and the actual minifigure head piece is used, in a blank manner for a lamp, light, right? An electrical light or something like that. Monochrome minifigures is also kind of the sub collection. So there's a lot you can do here, Wes. Is there anything else that you kind of think is notable about minifigures?
Um, yeah, so all those points, absolutely right. Right. Some other kind of interesting things. They've started designing torsos that can get stacked on top of other torsos. There's some
Torsos on
instances
torsos
and
on torsos on torsos on torsos.
yep, Star Wars, Ninjago. I think some of the hidden side sets featured it too. So effectively, you can
Hmm.
have 4 sets of arms on a minifigure. Um,
Garmadon.
yep. The hands, like we mentioned, do swivel, right? So that's kind of a big feature to kind of give them just a little bit more life. Um, the tops of the hands are the same size as a stud, so they can actually fit underneath a brick as like an anti-stud. So that's kind of an
Hmm.
interesting technique you'll see Lego employ. The legs will rotate independently, like we mentioned, and that's kind of one of the big differences. They can rotate almost 90 degrees forward, I think just a little beyond that, and then almost 45-degree backwards. So in total, about 135 degrees of movement forward and backwards, which again is distinct. You have 4 different leg types, right? So you have the long legs, sort of more recently featured in Avatar, but I believe also featured in Lego Toy Story at one point. And we're talking the blue people Avatar, just for clarification. You have the
Is that
regular standard
derogatory,
legs.
West? Can we call them the blue people? The
I think
Navi?
they might not enjoy that terminology, but seeing as how they are indeed fictional, I am going to give myself a pass on that. But you're right. I probably should call them the Navi. So the
Oh, you mean
the
the blue
Ava-
people?
yes, yes. There's the regular legs, the medium legs, right? Those are usually kind of used to depict adolescence. I think introduced. I don't know if it was formally introduced
There's
in the Harry Potter theme, but that's where we see it a lot as they depict Harry and Ron and Hermione and the rest of the students kind of in their sort of awkward teenage years. And then we have the
I
short
believe it
legs, and
was
the
the
short
Lego Ewok, right? Oh, you're sorry. You said mini scale.
the medium ones, yeah. The short
Yeah,
ones,
yeah.
I think it was either an Ewok or it was Anakin, but those came around kind of in the
It
beginning of
was
Lego Star
not
Wars.
Anakin. It was the Ewok, and then it was Dobby
Um,
the house elf, which is why I was like, I think it was
okay,
Ewoks. Because Anakin, that first pod racer, he has long legs, and
that's right.
it
That's right.
looks really funny. I don't know. I don't
the
know why, but like whenever I see that,
Well, he's
I'm
the same
just
size as Padme and or
like,
Qui Gon Jinn.
yeah, just like lols.
Long,
Just that
regular,
one.
medium, and
That one
short,
just hits different.
yeah, are not the official names. So that was just how I kind of divided them up. We've also seen things like peg legs, alien legs, skeleton legs, ghost torsos that are sort of more commonly used in like the Dementors. The modern Dementors is a good example of that. And then there's dresses and robe pieces that also exist. Finally, for the Lego minifigure, skin tones were introduced in 2003 with Lego basketball, uh, and was expanded to licensed themes shortly thereafter. However, with non-licensed themes, Lego still continues to use the yellow coloration. And just like before, we sourced this information from Wikipedia.
Also, there are over 8 billion Lego minifigures. So, if they ever rise up, we are done for.
Oh no.
Yeah, so more minifigures than people in the world. And then there's a couple of, we should do an episode on like the entire history of the minifigure itself, cuz this is a 40 plus year old just feature of Lego sets at this point. But while we're talking about their features, the top of the head was changed from a solid stud from back in the day to the hollowed version. Um, and the rumor was so that people, if a child ate it, it could be, you could still breathe through it if swallowed. But I don't think that was ever official, and also didn't really make sense because what if they ate the torso? Like why the head? So
Yeah.
that was always one of those kind of weird things that like I'd always heard, but I was like, I don't think that that's true. So, but we'll bring it back to the Lego minifigures versus mini dolls and West. I think it's certainly interesting that kind of from the get go, right? You have the yellow minifigures and the mini dolls are not right. That most notably not.
Yes, and I actually just was looking that up as we were talking because I was like, I'm pretty sure the Friends use flesh tones too, and they do,
Yeah. Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Always. Yeah.
um, in this case, whether it's licensed or non-licensed, the minifigure or the mini doll is generally using realistic skin tones, whereas the minifigure still does not. So
And the mini dolls are always named too, right? You don't just get like generic
generic.
town a mini doll. You've got
Hmm.
Andrea. You've got I'm sure there's a Monica out there. I'm sure there's a I don't know why I've only got Andrea in my head right now. What other mini dolls names are there, Wes?
Well, you are thinking of Andrea, kind of most famously
Because
from
the
Andrea's
Modern
Modern
Mansion.
Mansion.
Yeah,
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 but what's
yeah.
interesting is Andrea is actually one of the original mini dolls in the Friends line, and they took those
Maya.
characters and actually grew them up for the more recent
Hmm.
Friends line, and so presented them as adults with kind of children of their own. So I there's some nuance to that mini Friends mini doll world that I think people are recognize, but maybe are not giving like Lego enough credit for because it's pretty fascinating that they are creating this sort of. I mean, are we gonna get like Andrea's retirement home in the future? 20 years from
The
now, right?
first
Like,
Lego Walker piece will be introduced. Then I'll have a little tennis ball at the bottom.
well, actually, did they introduce? They introduced the kind of one walker for Up, right? The Up house, the individual walker. He did.
Oh, dang it.
I think he was using a paint roller, if I'm not mistaken, but not a two.
Not a custom piece.
Right, right, right.
Well, and it's we're getting into kind of the conversation here of the difference, right? We talked about each uniquely, and so West, I know you're a bit of a scale nerd, and folks, don't worry, West has got all the math for you. But one thing that's really interesting is from a realism standpoint, you could define a minifig as stylized, cartoony, blocky, or exaggerated, and a mini doll as human like, proportional, right? Longer legs, slimmer waist, which is really funny because when they were first announced, right? The minifig came first. We established that 1978, right? 2012 for the mini doll. But when they were first announced, it was like, oh wow, like Lego's making this for a female audience, but like, is this the right image for girls? Because they're skinnier and they're actually, more feminine and curved, and they got long. Like, this isn't necessarily good. And you and I were actually at mini Bricks and Minifig. Nothing to do necessarily with the story. That's just the setting. We were there, and mom was there talking to, I think it was the son, and the son's, oh, I'm gonna go get some Star Wars sets. So they go and they're checking out, and they're looking at the minifigures on the display case. And mom goes, oh, what's this? He goes, I don't know. That's the mini doll. That's for girls. And the mom's comment was, wow, of course they made the skinny ones for girls. And I just, if I were there today, I would have been like, well, actually, ma'am, the mini doll is more proportional to the a human than a minifigure. So, West, why don't you nerd out with me a little bit here and explain that to the listeners?
Yeah, and so we did some math on the minifigure, but the reference that we're going to use is kind of friend of the podcast, Tom Alphin, and his Brick Architect website, and he's got a really fantastic Lego figures in scale model
Is this something
web
we can
page.
link in the link tree
We will
for the episode?
absolutely do that.
Awesome.
In addition to the Brickopedia articles that we pulled from for the discussion, because there's some more information in there. We just couldn't pack it all into our show notes. But anyways, Tom and I actually more or less came to the same conclusion for the classic minifigure, right? Which is you take the average height of a human, you compare it to the height of a minifigure, and that's how you figure out your scale, right? And so, as we mentioned in the past, a minifigure is scaled to about 1:42, right? Height ratio. Mini dolls are 1:38, and as we talked about, right, the smaller the scale, that ratio 1:38
Uh
means
huh.
that it's actually bigger, right? So like 1:2 is half scale, whereas like 1:4 is quarter scale, right? So it should be a quarter of the size of the thing that you're comparing it to, right? So in this case, 1/40th or 1/42nd of the size of a regular human versus 1/38th. Um, but we can also look at like the ratio between height to width. So ratio height to width to the sort of standard height to width for a human, based off of averages. And Tom's sourcing his information from Wikipedia, is 170 centimeters by 40 centimeters wide, roughly 0.23 width over height. The minifigure is around 0.4. The mini doll is about 0.32. So in either case, the minifigure and mini doll are actually still proportionally more wider than they are taller, and so that proportionally to kind of standard human sizes, they are not in scale completely. So you get to sort of a weird situation where when you're building to scale in Lego, you have to pick: do I want to build in scale to width or to height? And to height is, I think, the easier scale to build in, and kind of the better scale, because to width things get pretty funky pretty quickly. But it also means that, like, give yourself a little slack when you're building like you know, an airplane or a train, right? You're never going to be able to fit the same number of minifigures into an airplane aisle realistically as you would in real life. So, um, sorry, I'm digressing. But anyways, neither of them are really to scale. Is sort of the end point. Although I would make the argument that the Lego mini doll proportionally, I think, is probably a better representation of a kind of standard human scale.
Which is I'm just breathing and taking it all in, West, which is to me really interesting because again, there was kind of controversy with when these originally came out, right? And so I think they're much better received now and kind of beloved in their own right and their own way. I mean, certainly, historically something I maybe rolled my eyes at, but like I'm just kind of indifferent to mini dolls in general. Not my cup of tea, right? But they're not intended for me, and they're intended for a younger audience, and um, that's totally fine, right? And they kind of coexist in their own right, but also certainly not Lego's first attempt at a more female focused mini fig, right? Traditionally, Lego did was it Scala first and then
Mm-hmm.
Belleville, where they actually had like 11. I think they were 11-inch figures and more in line with a traditional Barbie, right? And I think Scala was 11-inch, so they were like kind of half size, and then Belleville was almost your full sized, almost Barbie like system. And so that what I really appreciate about minifigures is it kind of did really and take that sort of doll type of attribute and got it down really close to a minifigure, right? I mean, they're 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 mini dolls, right? It is a real true attempt from Lego to be like, Barbie, we're not just going to copy you, right? And
Right.
just kind of
They're creating their own distinct thing.
right. It exists in its own world, and cool, good for it, love it.
By and large, relatively compatible with the existing Lego system. Although, as you mentioned, it's not perfectly compatible, but
Right, right.
relatively
Yeah.
speaking.
And again, nobody's making a house with minifigures for walls, and if you
Yeah.
are, you can do a lot of things with Lego and a lot of creativity. Maybe I need to see that one before I fully embrace it and give it a try. Or
I don't know, yeah, if minifigure walls are fully
yeah,
endorsed here at AFOLs Welcome.
if you're having fun and not hurting anybody, you do your minifigure walls. Maybe it's around Halloween, right? A House of a Thousand Corpses. Maybe they took it literally. I don't know.
There you go.
But what I do know is we can digress. So, West, let's shift back to minifigures. Why
Yeah.
minifigures?
Well, I mean, I think minifigures themselves are the standard that Lego has set since the beginning. And even predating the minifigure was kind of a version of the minifigure that had the head and the
Mm-hmm.
torso and legs all combined into one, but didn't have the arms on it. And so it kind of had the same profile of the minifigure in terms of width and height, but it didn't have the movability of the legs, and I believe you couldn't pull them apart. I think they were all kind of one molded piece. And so the minifigure has sort of continued with that scale since then, and really has become the standard Lego scale. I think it's entirely possible to build outside of the minifigure scale using the Lego system, right? Using things like the chairs and everything else. But, we have talked about this, and especially in our Lego scale episode, the scale, when you're thinking about Lego, right, you got to be able to embrace the imperfection or else it'll drive you nuts. The
Right.
Lego just doesn't really translate to the real world, right? It's really difficult to have the interior and exterior of the building having two separate colors in Lego, whereas it's really easy in real life for me to paint my inside wall one color and allow my bricked outside wall to remain the other color. And
West,
if
if
I'm
if you're
gonna
telling me it's really easy to paint your interior walls, you want to come over to my new house in a couple months and paint
no, thank
those?
you. Not at all.
No, you made it seem so easy though. So you just
Well, because it's so easy, I'll just allow you to take care of it yourself. So
touche.
I wouldn't want
Good
to get in the way.
response.
But anyways,
No,
it's
no.
the
By all
standard.
means, by all means.
It's the standard that's been with Lego now for the last 50 years, a little over 50 years. I think 1974 was when the first. I know we said it was patented in 1979. I believe it was first introduced in 1974. And so you see, right, like this is what everything is based around with like not. It's not the cornerstone Lego piece, but it's the minifigure is pretty essential to the modern Lego
Mm-hmm.
system. That also, though, is not a great reason as to why, because just because something is doesn't mean it's like special necessarily. And so I think, I mean, that kind of, I think, sums up my main argument. Like we've talked about, like, they're not perfect by any means, but it's what we got. So unless Lego was to really work on creating a more proportional minifigure style character, this is kind of what we're stuck with.
Yeah, and it's almost like this unique. It's a bug. It's a feature, not a bug of Lego, right? The scale that the minifigure has therefore created within the universe of Lego existing, right? Because it's kind of the mini doll's an issue because it doesn't fit into that or play well into that, but the scale itself should therefore be the issue, you know? So it's kind of like this cool world where like you're right, don't get too caught up on scale with Lego. But
Yeah.
when it does work out, like the Game Boy, for example, that we're seeing, mwah, chef's kiss, right? Um, so I think the other thing too is the expression, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna maybe take this in a direction that you don't think. And this is maybe tick, a teak, as they'd say on Lego Masters Australia, for the minifigure versus the mini doll. And the mini doll is obviously more expressive when it comes to like facial expression, right? They're
Mhm.
usually more exaggerated. They've got bigger eyes. They've got a bigger area for kind of the face printing, so that you can get more raw, natural, humanistic expression. Where I start to struggle with the mini doll is that the torso, as we've talked about, is not as wide. The legs are not as wide. And so what you do find, or at least, N of one over here, what I anecdotally find is that you lose a lot of the torso printing storytelling, leg printing story. You almost lose a lot of the what am I wearing expression, right? And
Yeah.
so when you see prints on torsos and legs, well, first of all, you don't see a ton of leg printing, right? Because it's just not a nice, clean, easy surface to even print a ton on. And then the torso, it's smaller. So I almost find it that the minifigure is more expressive and a little bit easier to really stand out and be defined because of that, in a way where you're not just necessarily looking at the human, right? You're looking at what
Yeah.
it is, right? You're looking at the minifigure itself. So, um, while
More options to customize it and really kind of capture
exactly.
what it is you're trying to see, right? And to your point, right? Like most modern minifigures now, the thing that sets them apart are things like leg printing, toe printing,
Hmm.
arm printing,
Arm printing.
very expressive and detailed torso printing. And we just don't necessarily see that on the Lego mini doll themselves, right?
But you see more accessories. You certainly see more facial expression, right? But for me, that's not what I am necessarily focused on. I'm more focused on you know, if I were to ask you, and I know the answer is rhetorical, what are some of the best minifigures ever? You would say The Lord of the Rings. And you would not say because Eowyn's eyes shine with the magical light and purity of the imperfections of the men of the West, right? You would say, I don't know, I just made that off the cuff. You would say because of the highly detailed torso armor printing, they were able to pack so much detail into that, right? So it's just a different way and almost a canvas, right, where you can tell a story on with the minifigure. And you kind of miss
Yeah.
that with the mini doll, even though inherently the mini doll and that system is set up to be, more cutesy, more animated, more expressive, more emotional, right?
Yeah. And I don't recall where I saw this discussion, but it fascinated me because the argument was that there's actually a difference in the way that boys and girls play with their toys. And I'm just trying to see if I had this in the Brickopedia section specifically, but effectively, it was that boys like to play in third person, whereas girls like to play in first person. And so you see a lot of, at least this is how, and this is again, so yeah, it's from the Brickopedia article, and it says, according to Lego's research, female children tended to project themselves onto the figures that they play with, while males will
Mm-hmm.
play in the third person. And so this was an attempt to, again, sort of give a new, you know, look or design for those, you know, for females to play with, right? Now, it's 2025. It's not 2012, right? So there's a few things I just want to acknowledge. We were talking about scales of humans and minifigures, and right, like humans come in all shapes and sizes. And so just taking the average height and width of a human is not always extremely representative, right? Lego's got different heights that they can kind of incorporate now. And the mini doll is kind of effectively one standard height. Um, but even then, it's not perfect. This was a issue that Barbie ran into too for a while, of people going like, Barbie is setting, unrealistic expectations for girls in terms of body image issues and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. I don't know if the mini doll necessarily corrects any of that per se. I also don't know to what extent that truly is a problem, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there before we kind of continue our discussion. But yeah, like you mentioned, right? Like, I think what we as uh, you know, boys in the United States sort of think about when we see those minifigures is not necessarily that storytelling aspect. We want to see the story told for us. And the minifigure itself kind of lends to the ability to sort of have a story fully depicted in the
Uh-huh.
minifigure, whereas the mini dolls are maybe a little less detailed so people can invent their own stories with them.
Grinch thinks that is a very good take because Grinch like third person.
But so I want to flip the script a little bit, Grinch.
Flip it.
Why make the argument for a mini doll, right? Like, what do they bring to the table?
We talked about the expressiveness, right? And we've talked a little bit about the scale. And I'd argue, from a scale perspective, it's better to scale. And what's interesting too is like when you take a step back and you take the let's put the dolls aside, West. Let's put the minis aside and focus on the sets.
Okay.
You don't
Okay.
really see a big scale difference in the sets, right? Because they're still semi compatible with each other, right? You
Yeah,
buy the Heart
absolutely.
Lake City mall or school and you get rid of the mini dolls and you're like, here it is, it's for my minifigures. So while we sit here and mathematically nerd out and count our beans on the uh the scale of the actual figures, from a system of play standpoint, there's not a major difference, right? Um, so I think that's worth noting. That's kind of just an indifference, right? It's not like you're getting Belleville and it's like, what do I do with this chair that's, you know, 5 times larger than my minifigure, right? It's
Right.
and I think it's an indifference that's actually a positive for the mini doll, right? Because it works within the Lego system, although technically it's not within the system, right? But that's a
Right. Right.
technicality. But one, I think that is overblown in a way to be like, oh well, see, this doesn't work. This ooh, 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 ooh. Again, you're not building a building out of minifigures, so it's fine. It's all good. You're sticking a hair and a hood on it, or rollers, whatever on the feet. It's fine.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting point too, and it's not necessarily an argument for the mini dolls, right? But like the sets that we've gotten from the Friends line, and we've mentioned this in the past, including I think one of the very first episodes we did in this podcast, which was our reaction to Andrea's Modern Mansion when it was first revealed.
Mm. Andrea
These
got a nice house. Got a nice house.
She's got a very nice house. And that wave of Lego Friends sets just absolutely crushed it, to include some really interesting mid-century modern styled buildings, houses that were included in the series. And we wouldn't get that, right, if the Friends line didn't exist and the mini doll didn't exist per se. And
Right.
and so while this isn't necessarily an argument for the mini doll, it's it is an acknowledgement that with the mini dolls creation, we've gotten some really interesting stuff as a result of it. And I if the mini doll is something that that people enjoy, like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Is again, maybe not necessarily an
Yeah.
argument for it, but I think it certainly defends its existence, right? Clearly, it's
Well, and
selling well.
another big teak, as they'd say in Lego Masters Australia, would be diversity, right? If that's something you value, the mini doll has fully embraced it, right? And
Right.
well, I mean, I guess you could argue that there's way more female mini dolls than males, but whatever. As far as just the system as a whole, it is very representative of cultures, different people, ethnicity, etc., right? And that is the intention. So it depending on, on what you value from your minifigure and system of play, that's a major tick, right? And I don't think it really detracts from anything, right? So it's not like, oh well, if you care about it, it's a positive. If you don't, it's a negative. It's either neutral or a positive, right? At the end of the day. So that's definitely something that I could say is for mini dolls. And while we're we don't need any encouragement to go on tangents on this podcast, I will slightly steer us off the track for a moment, but get us right back on track. Is that the mini doll has also kind of, branched out in a way for stylistically within the Friends line and some of the Disney Princess slides to the animals as well, right? Kind of just as we were
Right.
mentioning, you've got stuff like the Friends draft, right? The Friends system has their own animals too, and I only mention it. Yeah, I know we're talking about minifigures versus mini dolls, but you see a lot of the similarities as far as emotion and um, stylistic art design when it comes to the larger eyes, right? A lot of that stuff transfers to that. So um while I don't really own any of the Friends animals, it certainly has had a mini dolls kind of accelerated some of that and therefore helped us get some additional animals even into system, right? Just having those out there, right, kind of forced them into fruition here a little bit from a Lego system standpoint as well, because they were like, hey, a lot of people are buying these sets with mini dolls to get these animals, right? So the innovation of the mini doll has led to other innovation within the Lego system itself, right?
Yeah. And you do see that too. I know I talked about the modern line, but the modern line that included Andrew's Mansion, the colors used in that series of sets was more, I would call, as we sort of traditionally understand, gender neutral, right? It wasn't maybe completely geared towards a female audience. And so you saw sort of cooler tones, darker tones, as well as sort of the traditional brighter tones that we would potentially associate with, and lighter tones with sort of a female audience. And so you do see the Friends line maturing to a point where it wouldn't be impossible. I think you could totally see in a year or two from now, kind of a truly gender neutral Friends series or line that's just Lego, right? With the characters just being mini dolls.
Hmm.
I don't know if we'd ever get anything beyond Disney as like an IP per se, but I I think it just proves that their compatibility within the larger system is maybe perceived by the collector or the fan of Lego only in so much of the context that mini doll is introduced to them, right? So like if you see the mini doll and inherently a system or a set that you're not really a big fan of because it's like Andrea's Tea Party, for example, right? And you're like, I don't care about that. Then like you're automatically gonna kind of not like
Well,
the
you
mini doll.
should.
But if you saw it in like Andrea's record store and it's, punk rock Andrea and it looks like a record store from like the 90s, Seattle grunge kind of look, you'd be like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like this is different. Right. So like
Hmm.
I don't think it necessarily I think when we think of the mini doll, one of the things that is both good and bad with it kind of holistically is the fact that it Lego has sort of traditionally skewed towards boys as sort of its audience, right? And the mini doll was meant to sort of course correct Lego and give a female audience something to look forward to. I'm not necessarily saying Lego needs to correct back per se, but the audience of boys who are used to Lego producing Legos, right, aren't going to suddenly look at the mini dolls necessarily, which it isn't bad if they do, but like they're not going to necessarily look at that and go like, oh, that's for me, right? Like it's clearly designed for a different audience, and that's okay. That shouldn't detract from like it being a thing necessarily, right? We can look at it sort of in the larger context of what it is really what I'm trying to say.
It's funny you said that, and I didn't plan this. I don't plan much in my life. Sometimes I just start a sentence and see where it takes me. That's an Office quote, by the way. Um, I've been quoting The Office a lot recently, and I'm so there for it. But my like I said, the last movie that I saw was Wicked in theaters. And when they came out, and by they I mean Lego, when Lego came out with Wicked sets, I told my wife, I said, "Hey, look, we got Wicked sets." And she's, "Oh my god, really?" And I showed her some pictures. She goes, "Ugh, it's mini dolls." And that was that. She didn't want it because it was mini dolls. So it is certainly an interesting question, Wes. Like, it served a purpose, and sometimes purposes are served. One thing that I did, and you said the C word, you mentioned collectors, is I went and looked at prices just to get an idea, right?
Yeah.
Of is there a Chase mini doll? Because that was kind of something I had in mind of when we were kind of looking at the notes for this episode. And as I mentioned, there are 8 billion minifigures that have been produced. So the supply is way up there, right? If anything's short supplied, it's the mini doll because there's 10 million produced, right? So I don't know, what is that? Um, the size of New York City versus the rest of the entire globe plus some, just about, right?
Pretty
Ish.
close. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot more minifigures, point, period. The most expensive mini doll I could find, and I think that's important, is there was no list, right? If you look, I encourage who's ever listening, go Google the most expensive minifigure, and you'll find 50 articles, 17 million YouTube videos, a whole brick economy list of your top 100. I mean, you'll find all the information in the world on these 8 billion minifigures that are out there. And, from a retail standpoint, Mr. Gold is certainly up there, right? You got some Comic Con stuff from a more, non retail standpoint, but still, Mr. Gold is the most expensive. Brick Economy has him valued today at $8,000. Um, Obviously, there's been some like other random stuff. There's been some, if you want to count it, there's like the wooden woo prop from the Ninjago movie. I think it sold for like $40,000. That's a one of one. There is a 40 karat gold C3PO out there that I think sold for like 80. A little bit of misinformation on the actual price, but my point is it's a lot. I struggled to find the most expensive mini doll. In fact, I couldn't find an article. I even asked AI to and it kept giving me minifigures. And so I finally did find on Brick Economy. I was just going through sets with mini dolls, and I found what I think is the most expensive mini doll, and that is Tiana from the movie The Princess and the Frog, coming in at a whopping $40. So from a collectability standpoint, um, $40 is not, I mean, it's expensive for a minifigure, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to, the upper echelon of the most expensive minifigures, it doesn't even get close. In fact, it's what you would pay in tax for some minifigures, right?
And that's interesting that the price difference is just so significant between the two of them, But like you mentioned, 8 billion minifigures versus 10 million mini dolls. That's quite a difference there. And we do have to acknowledge, right? I mean, the mini doll has been around for just a little bit over a decade, whereas the minifigures is clocking in around 5 decades now. So uh, I think that's an important thing too when we compare the two of them from like that perspective, which is just like the minifigure has so much more time and staying power within Lego. So it's a interesting comparison to make. And this isn't a knock on it, but like kind of, I wouldn't say meaningless, right? But it's not like a one-to-one compare. It's an apples and oranges situation, right? So, um,
Mm-hmm.
but what
Yeah,
really
because
stood out to me in that, go ahead,
the
go ahead.
Mr. Gold, there's only like couple thousand of those, right? So
Right.
it's not one to one, but I, there's probably more minifigures out there that are worth more than the most expensive mini doll, right? Like
Yeah.
the number of mini dolls is probably representative of the minifigures that are worth more, right? Like there's just a lot, right? So
Right. And what stood out to me was you said, yeah, you can search the web for, most expensive minifigure, and like you sort of, jokingly said, right, like you're gonna find 70, different YouTube videos about it, and you're gonna have, 4 or 5 different websites, each with their own hot take on the most expensive minifigure, but you don't see the same thing for the mini doll. And so I think that's a telling comparison there, that just from a collector standpoint, right? The mini doll just doesn't have the same perceived value as the minifigure. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. I think I could take a stab at it, but I think it's for reasons we've kind of already covered throughout our time in the podcast.
well, and it's kind of a good transition point, right, Wes? Because one thing we kind of set up as we were talking through the differences is that the mini doll, we talked about like the play, right? More intended to, hey, this is me. I'm gonna go do this. Boo doo doo doo. I'm gonna go to Heart Lake City and go to the mall with my friends. We gonna have a good time. Um, the minifigure, much more customizable, right? Much more customizable, much more doing, right? You can take off the arms, you could take off the leg. The mini dolls, you just can't, right? They're just kind of it, right? It's like going out and buying a keychain, right? It's just, and by keychain, I mean a Lego minifigure keychain. You just have the
Right. You're
thing.
not swapping the
And
pants out on the
so,
keychain.
right. And in some regards, that can kind of decrease the supply. And I'm not saying enough to like overinflate the price, but I just mean there's more reason why people will go and get it as well, right?
Right.
The couple of random collectible minifigures aren't collectible because people like the inherent minifigure. They like it because it has cool chainmail that you can only get on that minifigure, and certainly does not explain. I mean, the most obvious explanation of the price difference is gonna be because there's a bigger demand, but it's just another layer of where we talked about like, hey, the minifigures are kind of more expressive. They're definitely more customizable. You can take the legs
Yeah.
off, you can take the arms off, you can take one head, you can do custom, and we talked to like Sobek, right? All he does is custom minifigs. Can't really do a custom mini doll. So as it comes back to this debate about a minifigure versus a mini doll, big tick for the minifig.
Yeah. So there's an interesting question then of, can minifigures and mini dolls coexist within like the larger Lego system? And
Absolutely not.
I have a good article, and we'll link this as well. We got a few links for the listeners this week, from Blocks Magazine, where the author basically asks that question and says, hey, can they coexist? And in kind of his own discussion about it, he kind of talks through, the Lego Movie 2 and sort of its larger discussion story, right? And then also talks through, effectively, that the Lego Movie 2 sets were the only ones that had both mini dolls and minifigures together, right? And if you recall, an important plot point in Lego Movie 2 was the brother's sort of resistance to playing with his sister. And his sister was the one playing with the mini dolls, and he was the one playing with his regular Lego minifigures. And because he was sort of hesitant to play with her, that sort of set up the friction that made the kind of story go, right? And as the story sort of alludes to, right, like everyone can enjoy, siblings can both enjoy playing with Legos, and that's kind of the happy ending for the Lego Movie too. But it presents that interesting question of like, could we see more sets with both minifigures and mini dolls in them? And I mean, I think the answer is sure, why not? Right? Like, I know the Lego Movie 2 sets didn't sell as well. I think the Lego Movie 2 wasn't as well received as the first
There's
Lego
all the
movie.
proof you need right there, West. You can't put them in the same set.
But I mean, there's, as we mentioned, like the differences with them are minor, and things are relatively cross compatible between the two figures. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, that answer is definitely like, sure, you certainly could, right? Now,
Right.
again, we have to acknowledge that the mini doll is targeted for a specific audience, that the minifigure is not. And so, like, it would be weird to see like a Lego City Police set with like a mini doll and a minifigure in it, right? Like, it it's not a commentary on like gender or anything else like that, right? Like it just doesn't really make sense. Like, why would you do that?
Well,
You
I
could
think
just
we
have,
outlined today they serve different purposes inherently,
sure,
right? One
sure,
purpose is not necessarily greater or has more magnitude than the other. It's just if you want to cut into a sandwich, you need a knife. If you want to eat soup, you need a spoon, right? So sometimes some stories are going to be told better with mini dolls. Other times they can be told better with minifigures. That doesn't mean one's inherently wrong versus the other. One may be a better choice, right, in certain circumstances, and one might be a better choice in other circumstances.
yeah. And so, like any good internet scholar, I took to Reddit to kind of try
Oh
to get a
man,
a
dude,
pulse for where
you
the
have a
larger
PhD in
community
Reddit too?
is. And so this was a sort of Reddit comment thread.
Reddit,
Um,
I own it.
our mini dolls are great, and why don't people like them? Was the title of the Reddit thread, and I won't call out any specific point on this other than to say interesting to see some mixed reviews, right? And I think it's important to look at this from like an academic perspective and not necessarily from a perspective of like one side is right or wrong or like inherently,
Minifigure go brr and mini doll go blah. That's my argument. That's all I got.
there you go.
That's how
Certainly,
Reddit
you and I
argues.
have acknowledged we don't have a huge history with mini dolls. We were collecting Lego before they came out, and so by the time they did, we were neither in the age range that they were initially targeted for, nor were those sets the sets that we were necessarily collecting. Right. Although both you and I have mentioned things like the Modern Mansion is a fantastic set, and we highly recommend it. And I, as you see Lego kind of with those series start to get away from strictly maybe a young female audience, I wouldn't be surprised if other people are getting them. I will end kind of our discussion here with my take, and then Grinch, I'll get your take. I think, to your point, the Lego mini doll served a purpose, right? That being said, I don't know if that purpose still needs to be served by the Lego mini doll. And I think if you had Andrea's Modern Mansion with minifigures in it, I think you would probably see. I don't know. It's hard. I mean, I don't have data, right? So this is all speculation and anecdotal, as we like to say. But I think you would see just as much of a sales of that set as you would if had it had mini dolls. Maybe even more.
I would argue you
potentially.
could see more. I mean, right? I mean, the theory would be you would see more if you were to conduct a study. It would the question you'd be asking is, do minifigures lead to better set sales, right?
Yeah, certainly, right? And so I think Lego was trying to expand to a female audience. I think they focused on the mini doll as part of that expansion. I think in hindsight, maybe they just needed to tailor certain sets more towards a female audience. And I don't know if the mini doll was a necessary part of that equation. Uh, we mentioned that Lego believed that a more stylized minifigure would be appealing, but since then we have seen minifigures that are more stylized, right? We see things like torso cutouts on the side of a minifigure, sort of indicating a more stylized or shapely figure. We see a lot more hair accessories and a lot more attention to that. And as we've gotten things like flesh tones and minifigures, for example, we are seeing that diversity. It's interesting. We've talked about it, right? But I think it's a good callback to kind of interrogate why the Friends line of Lego mini dolls, a non-licensed line, has flesh tones, whereas like regular Lego does not. And I think Lego could probably take away lessons from their time with the mini doll, but I don't know if it's necessarily crucial towards like the larger Lego universe. So I suppose my end take is a respectful acknowledgement of everything the mini doll has brought us and gotten us, and understanding its importance in the Lego lineup, but also a healthy dose of skepticism of, I don't know if it necessarily still needs to be a thing. And I think that's my take.
I, West, would argue that it's fine. I know.
I mean,
Shocking.
yeah.
It's 2025. We either have to destroy the world or create the world with excitement, right? I mean, it's got to be a hot take or no take. And I think it's fine. And I'll tell you why it's absolutely fine. And I'm going to see how many times I can say the word fine as I make this pretty okay and fine take. Number one, we've talked about how
By picking a
we
middle
don't get
ground,
a
though, are
lot.
you kind of subverting that system? So in and itself, it
See,
is a hot take.
you are the problem, West. This is the thing. No. Look, actually, uh, if I had to say left or right, I would say mini dolls are fine. No, I'd be supportive actually. And I didn't actually when we came into this episode, I didn't think that would be my takeaway. But as I've
Interesting.
listened to this brilliant conversation that you can only find here on AFOLs Welcome, a Lego podcast, please subscribe and like. No. But seriously, all jokes aside, I'm leaving this conversation with maybe a little bit more respect for the
An
mini doll.
appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, dude. I'd argue that Lego is semi moving away from the Lego doll, mini doll. We talked about it a couple times. Oh, this Disney set came out, but it's got Lilo and mini doll. It's got
Moana.
Moana and a mini doll, right? I wanted the minifig. It's got Wicked, but they're mini doll. But this one's got Wicked and minifigs, right? This one's got Moana and minifig. Like, cool. We are starting to see that, right? And Lego themselves is acknowledge that. And we are getting cross characters that would traditionally have been only a mini doll. And I can say traditionally because for the longest time, you could only get some Disney princesses as mini dolls. That has changed. So I think Lego has themselves acknowledged that. But
Yeah.
we've also talked about the lack of, true tangible data. We get a lot of data through stuff like brick economy, but that's kind of all secondhand and peer built databases, right? It's not sales data, right? We can't sit here and say Andrea's Modern Mansion was the most popular mansion building of 2024 because we can't claim that. We don't have any sales data that supports it, right? We can't sit here and say minifigure sets sell X times better than mini doll sets. We just don't have that data. But what we do have is the Lego annual financial report, and they do list their top 5 themes. And the recurring themes on there are Friends, City, Star Wars, sometimes Technic, sometimes Marvel, usually not, but every once in a while, and almost always, if not always, Friends. And so what I think we're starting to see is Friends is mini dolls, right? They don't really do elves anymore. Well, not they don't really do. They don't do elves anymore, right? We saw them. I was about to say cross contaminate, but I don't think that's the word I'm going for here. we saw them cross categorize mini dolls and minifigs in Lego Movie 2. We haven't really seen them do that since, right? But Friends is ubiquitous with the mini doll, and it is consistently a top seller. So I think it's kind of earned its own place. And nobody's here saying you can't buy Andrea's Modern Mansion.
And
I
put
mean, if it was a
minifigures
real
in it.
mansion, I couldn't, right? But yeah, you can buy it and you can put minifigures in it. So does there need to be a world where we totally close out this one side of it when by all meanings of the word, it's selling pretty well, right? It's consistently one of the
Yeah,
best sellers
by all
as a theme.
indications that we have,
Right,
right?
right. So do you need to have two systems? No. Do we lose anything by having two systems? Also, no. Do we gain anything? We gain innovation. We gain a lack of complacency by Lego. We gain cool utensils, right? We gain cool accessories. We gain a expansion of an existing subsystem within the Lego system of the mini peg hole, right? You gain expansion into some themes a la Wicked. Who knows? We may not have even got Wicked sets if they couldn't have done a mini doll. There was no proof of concept or market to then turn around and say, no, 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 adult fans will buy this too. Lego fans will buy this too. Hey, Wicked, people will buy this because they're buying Friends already. We know there's an interest in this, right? Because they do market research too. They could definitely say, hey, we're going to market the crap out of our toys towards younger female girls, right? Because that's who our audience is. Lego, you can't do that, right? So we get some things that we maybe we take some of these things for granted because the mini doll exists.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's 2 points there that are really important to unpack. One is, the innovation that the mini doll has given us, and the fact that Lego, just by creating the mini doll, is attempting to better serve its audience, right? And that tells us that Lego's listening. It tells us that they're actively listening and they're working on it. Because we got a really great email from Docman a few months ago talking about how when he was raising his daughters, like there weren't Lego sets geared towards like young girls. And he wrote to the Lego group and said, "Hey, I need you guys, like you guys should fix this." And they responded and said, "We're working on it." And it still took them quite a bit to eventually get to Friends, right? So, but they are working on it, right? And so I think if we were to live in a world without Friends and without the mini dolls, what we might be trading is a Lego group that doesn't necessarily respond to feedback to its audience or from its
Uh-huh.
consumer base. So I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, and some kudos to send Lego's way. The other thing is, like, to your point of like, just because there's mini dolls in a set doesn't mean like I can't buy a set and put minifigures in it. Like that's not a problem. Like that's a perceived issue, right? But like at the end of the day, it's kind of a non-issue. And I think sometimes when we don't have things that are tailored to us, we as individuals kind of get like a little upset about that. And it's like, that's totally fine, dude. This was meant for
Just wait
somebody
till you
else.
turn 30. You're about to find out that the world is no longer tailored to you.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, you can still buy and enjoy the Lego set, right? Like it's just, yeah, it's got mini dolls in it. And so um I think those are two really important takeaways from your point. And I really like I think it's interesting that you sort of gained that appreciation along the lines of our conversation, because I totally think that's fair. So
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we live in a world where the minifigure is kind of the more gender neutral of the two, right? I mean, it is. There's no like guy figure out there. What would we even call them? Like mini soldiers, mini souls, like mini brothers. What would we, what would be the point there, right? The minifigure was already there, but we also now live in a world where it's kind of shifted to say like, okay, the minifigure is now the gender neutral, and that was the point, right? So you could say the point of the mini doll has served its purpose. But until you see that Friends completely drop off the face of the earth as far as being a successful line for Lego, you can't say that, right? You just can't.
Yeah.
And we are
I
now getting to this point where, you know, the mini doll came out more than 10 years ago. You know what's going to start to happen here is you're going to start to have a new generation of Lego builders come in where, you know, on one end it's going to be super nostalgic, and on the other end it's going to be what they know, right? So it's only going to be built upon kind of from here and really cemented into the larger Lego category.
Yeah, we're gonna have a whole new generation of AFOLs who grew up building with mini dolls,
Right.
and
And that's great.
that's totally okay, right? And Lego with its kind of more adult oriented lines might inevitably try to focus on that, and that's also okay. And I think to the point you made, which is wise, right? Like it's really truly impossible for us to say Andrea's Modern Mansion would have sold better with minifigures in it. We can speculate it, but like we really cannot prove that point. And so from Lego's perspective, right, like let's balance some risk here, some corporate risk, right? If Friends is a really well-selling series, which includes the mini doll, do we risk undermining those sales numbers by reverting back to minifigures versus just keeping things going? Because clearly it's doing well, right? And I think from Lego's perspective, that risk is probably not worth it, because I think they probably would have if they thought it was. So, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like it works for what it is supposed to do.
That being said, we do need a official Lego City mall. That's not Heart Lake City. We need an official Lego City vet clinic. That's not Heart Lake City, and school. But I will die on that hill another day.
No, but you do bring up, yeah, there's some crossovers that we do need in the regular Lego City that Lego Friends has kind of maintained some exclusive control over.
I like Lego Friends because I don't have them in real life.
Oh man.
That's a
Well,
great place to end, isn't it?
I think so.
That's a great place. But I have 8 billion Lego Friends. All
There you
right,
go.
West, let's move over to our brick mail. Brick mail.
Yeah, so for our first brick mail today, we have a Spotify comment from DJ Dave, who writes, and I believe this is the first time he's written in. He says, one issue with the point made about collectors, re-releases in no way helps them. If you are collecting the OG GOAT, for example, the Lego group re-releasing them in no way helps you obtain the OG GOAT. And I think he brings up a really interesting point. I do want to clarify. I think when I meant it helps, like re-releasing could help collectors, what I meant to say is like, if you were trying to collect a set and it has retired, you could, and Lego then re-released it, right? Like you have another opportunity to go get it and collect it. Now, I'm thinking from collective of like purely a possessive kind of standpoint, not like an investment standpoint. So we need to kind of separate that, because obviously Lego flooding the market with more Lego sets is going to reduce, the cost or the price of your set. So theoretically, but I mean, it's an interesting example. One of the things though that I think is interesting about your take here, Dave, is that, right, like Lego re-releasing or issuing a new GOAT, right, means like if you wanted to collect the GOAT, now you have another opportunity to collect it. But if you are still differentiating between the two and you still want the old one, like, yeah, that's not going to help you, because the old one's, potentially not going to be re-released. But it's interesting. I mean, we know Lego has, I believe Lego has commented on this before, right? They're not trying to necessarily create exclusive minifigures always, right? And so they
Except for
do
when they
try,
are.
right? as
We
they
don't
have
want to do
every
that.
right to.
Except for when we do.
Sometimes.
Asterisks.
Right. And I'm sure this is something where like Lego's acquisition of Bricklink is going to really help them kind of monitor and just be aware of that kind of thing. Right. And so you can find all sorts of examples of one off pieces that was only ever made in one color that came out in 3 sets. And so that version of that piece is 2 to 3 times more expensive than the light bluish gray version of that piece. Right. Like that's not a unique thing in Lego per se, but I think it's a challenge that Lego's always going to have to balance, and I don't know if they're always getting it right, but you know, Lego's really truly a commodity market to some extent. So
And it's kind of an interesting little paradox that exists in the Lego collecting community. It's like, I want the goat. Lego comes out with new goat. Now I want two goat. Or you just want one, right? Like it is this kind of world of like, hey, we're going to re-release this so that more people can get it. Well, dang it, now I need to. Like,
yeah, but
now
like
I got to go get the other one.
You've created farm mocks in the past, right? And like because the Lego, I mean, remember when we went and looked for like Lego pigs for a while because like that was like a really rare animal, and then they released sets and like little polybags with pigs in them, and now suddenly they're not super rare. And I think, right, like if you're just trying to get that animal, for example, a goat, to put in like a petting zoo or something, right? Like it's inaccessible to you because it's just vacuumed up by collectors.
Right.
And so by Lego re-releasing the goat, they're making it more accessible to people who want the goat because it's a goat and not because it's rare and exclusive.
Not because it's the goat. Well, that was always the funny thing. I think that was always the meme with the goat specifically. I love the example, by the way, Dave, because like, part of the people had like goat T-shirts, right? Of like the Lego goat, like the goat, like it was just like it was the goat, and it was $150. All right, up next we have an email from Pez. They write, "Hey Grinch and West, I've been listening to your podcast for a few months now and have been slowly catching up on older episodes. I'm 43, and when I was a kid, I didn't have many Lego sets because I was more into action figures, and we could really only afford one or the other. When my son hit the Lego age, we started building together, and I got hooked. Welcome. About 5 years ago, my coworkers decided I should have my own sets, and it started getting me Star Wars and Harry Potter kits for birthdays and Christmas. That accidentally turned into full-blown Lego addiction. I don't know if that counts as a dark age since I never really had a beginning. Now I'll talk to the folks at the AFOLs office. I'll let you know
who determine
yeah.
what qualifies.
And we'll vouch for you. Now I've got a whole office full of Lego, and I keep trying to figure out where to fit more. I listen to new episodes every week, but I'm also catching up on up backwards, which is trippy. West Move in Reverse was a ride. I just listened to the Ninjas episode then, and the new one about the remakes versus re-releases. Personally, I'm not big on re-releases. The pieces and building techniques have advanced too much to go backwards. Remakes, when done right, make way more sense. The Ninjas episode, you mentioned the idea of characters going back in time and making that a theme. I think that'd be cool if Lego made one big universe theme where the classics like ninjas, Western pirates, and castle all existed together. Imagine ninjas fighting cowboys or knights, teaming up with the pirates. The stories could go anywhere. They could remake the iconic sets with modern parts and details for adults who grew up with these themes while adding new ones for younger fans. At the very least, they could have the Easter eggs hinting towards old sets. I live near Schaumburg, Illinois. After hearing your Brick World Chicago episode, I really want to go next year. Hopefully, I'll see you guys there. Thanks for the podcast." Pez, have you watched the Lego movie? I think that's right up your alley based off of that last paragraph. But no, I mean, it's interesting to build that up. Bring that up. I'm glad you brought that up on this episode specifically because it'd be a fun way to kind of go back and kind of pay homage and hit some remakes here with Lego, right? You could have a team of people traveling back, to adventures, to rock raiders, right, to this world, right. They kind of did it with time cruisers, but it was a little less on the nose, right. It was kind of, it's supposed to just be its own thing and kind of just this weird, you know more
And they didn't have the
literal
themes to kind of go
hodgepodge.
revisit
Right,
at that
right,
time.
right. And so I think it'd be a fun way to do it. I think they'd have to do it with a little bit of oh, West, what's the word I'm looking for? Um restrain, restraint, right? Because, I don't think what the intention wouldn't be to like, hey, here's 20 remakes and we're just going to include this one minifigure in it, right? You'd want it to have a good story and narrative in its own right. Like you'd want to have, if you had a 6 set wave, you'd want to have 3 or 4 of those be, really predominantly about this story in specific, developing specifically this story. And then and then they went to the ninjas and you get a temple remake. And then they went to Dino Island and you get a remake of something like that, right? You wouldn't just want it to be remake, 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 remake. But I think it's a great idea. I really do. So thank you. Thank you for writing in. And I will definitely be at Brick World. I'll have some stuff to display. And West is a 50 70.
I don't know if
West
I'm
is
moving again
50-50.
next year or not, but if I'm not moving
One of us
when Brick
probably
World,
is.
then I will make every effort to attend. I what I was actually thinking of as you were describing, Pez, as you were describing kind of your concept there, Grinch. Allow me to pitch you this Lego TV show idea. Johnny Thunder goes back in time, and I was thinking originally like he could be dreaming and he's like, in all of these universes, but I think he should go back in time and something happens that, I mean, it's effectively what Pez said, right? But like all of these worlds collide and you get kind of this, weird, like, yeah, pirates facing, Western or, whatever the case is. I think that would just be such a really cool way for Lego to revisit that. And
Mhm.
in a way that they could do that and really kind of pay homage to those sets without maybe having to do like a full on revisit of all of those themes. But
What I would like to see if it was a, revisit slash, you know, cross category mingling mix, right?
crossover,
Yeah, I'd love to see like you you know how like back in the day specifically Lego would be like, hey, if you like this set, you could also make this random thing that nobody's ever thought of.
turn
Like
this pirate
they
ship
took
into an AT-AT.
yeah, they took like the X-Wing and they were like, oh, look at this walker thing you can make. And it's like, what, where did this thing crawl out of? Like, what even is this?
Did the
But they
Lego
were
designer
fun. I
just
don't know.
take the
Yeah,
kit and
yeah.
give it to their kids and go like, what else can you make out of this?
It's like some of those first AI images that you see, and it's like, hey, make ice cream. And it's just like, that is, I don't know what that is, but that is not ice cream. Like, it would be cool like if they took like a, hey, you've got Western versus ninjas, right? And then it came in almost like a battle pack, like we saw like the, I don't know, most recent Star Wars dropship battle pack for the 25th anniversary. Like you got the Imperial side and the Rebel side, like what you got the Western side and the ninja side, and then it has suggestions for like a Western ninja mech that you could build from like the two if you wanted to. I think it'd be kind of fun and like another fun way to kind of play homage to that. Like, not only is the story obviously creative because it's like, when do you have Western versus ninja, but like, you know, make this cool mech, this cowboy ninja mech, and it's got like a revolver in one hand and a, you know, katana in the other. I think that would be a fun kind of way to also play homage to that like creative side of Lego.
So it's just the wild, wild west, Will Smith's famous historical Western movie version of Lego.
It's the wild, 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 wild west because it's going to get wild with the occasional pirate.
Absolutely.
And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at afolswelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
See ya.